right, let's get into this lesson here. Essentially, we're playing in the key of D major today. And so I'm moving up to the 10th fret of the low E string here, the note D, of course, and I'm going to use the E-type chord from the Cage system to orient myself, and then I'm going to use the classical method to count up to the 4th degree. 1, 2, 3, 4. That puts me at G, and I now need to play a G major chord or a G major arpeggio in this case. So I'm like, okay, G major, that's normally down here, right? Root inversion, first inversion. And then, okay, so if I'm starting here, done deal, right? So that's basically G major from the 6th string, and this is G major from the A string, 5th. Right, so that's very important, of course. Then I can be like, oh, well, that's the Mixolydian position. I recognize that right away. So now I can evolve it up to the major 7 variant. And then I can add in the 9th now. And of course, in the example, you just hear me dumb it down to 3 strings. Okay, so that's basically a hell of a lot of theory just jammed into like 2 minutes there. So if you're struggling to understand some of that stuff, just go watch some of the previous videos. But really, you should sit down and try to figure some of this stuff out for yourself. Notice how I used a whole bunch of techniques there to actually get the answer, of course, which is the things you're doing. Basically move from the root to the 1st to the 2nd inversion and be like, okay, that stuff is now related and all the rest. I'm in the Mixolydian position, so on and so forth. I use the classical method to determine where I want to start from, in this case, the 4th degree, or the 5th, or the 6th, or the 7th, or the 1st again. All of this stuff, reinforcing it over and over and over again, is going to be absolutely essential to getting to the upper echelons of playing and stuff like that, because you just need incredible speed of mind to be able to just be like, where am I? And then hear immediately what you should be doing. And that just takes a lot of practice. There's no special skill involved, just hours and hours and hours of practice and being adventuresome. Never do things where you're like sort of practicing in a vacuum. Very bad, right? So of course, step number 1 has to be just lay out the diatonic sequence. So I'm starting at the 4th degree here, right? Half step down. Okay, well that puts me now into this minor 7 variant, F sharp. The 3rd degree, right? Well, that comes from the Phrygian position. I'm just, again, dropping the low E string, moving down. 2nd degree, another minor 7, shocker. 1st degree, another major 9. And then, of course, I'm now jumping down to the note C, because we're working in the key of D. D is the 5 chord of G, and the 4 chord is C. Therefore, D and C are very closely related. I can use basic principles like triad pairs, which is why I do C major 9 here, before ending in the natural minor. Okay, so that right there, I know that I blistered through that very quickly, but it's important that you understand you're never going to get this stuff under your fingers until you start doing some of this stuff by yourself, by figuring it out step by step, right? So again, the first thing you should basically do is just get comfortable at doing the arpeggio sequence, starting in the major 9, then minor 7, major 9, and then minor 7 again. Let's do it slowly. Done deal, and there it is. Essentially the sequence complete. Of course, now what we're going to do is just localize it to the top 3 strings, and let's talk about the technique here. I'm going to start with a downstroke so I can start doing economy picking. I'm going to go down, and then I'm going to go up, up, up. Now, that right there is incredibly important. A lot of people are just like, whatever, rando. No. Orient your picking so that you can get as many upstrokes or downstrokes in a row as you can. Right? So it's down, up, 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 down, up, down, down. Okay, so just keep practicing that until you get an insano speed. But again, the idea here is that you're going to actually consciously think, should I start with an upstroke or should I start with a downstroke? Which one's going to make my life easier? And then, of course, the last piece here is just the spidering aspect. You can see me cycle once on the highest string. So I start on the highest string. And I end with that little bit there, which lets me now move my finger to the next position. Okay, now listen, there is no sort of exercise you can do besides just sitting there and grinding through it and then consciously being like, okay, I'm sort of... Get your finger into position. Again, notice this weird stretch there. Half step, not so bad. That little spidering, crawling down on the high E string, stuff like that, is going to be very, very useful later on. Trust me, especially when you start going fast and you're doing all kinds of other arpeggio sequences like diminished runs and stuff like that. I saw Andre Nieri do the solo from Burn yesterday. If you haven't seen that, oh my God, you should see the absolutely terrifying diminished run he does. It is ridiculous. I was just like, damn. Just when you think you're getting close, negative, the rope or the rug is just pulled right out from underneath your feet. Okay, so that basically covers the essentials of the arpeggios. I know that I'm moving to the 4th degree of D major. I know that that arpeggio is based in the Mixolydian position. I know how to evolve it up. And then I know how to make alterations, of course. And so on and so forth. And then I know how to move around diatonically. Ooh, with the little slide in there. Now this one, another variation. Now I know I'm kind of choking there. I shouldn't have done that at one time, but I'm just like, whatever, do it. Right? It's not about being perfect. It's about, you see, my mind's already like, well, what can I do to make that sound a little bit more interesting? And notice I'm adding a whole new element, this little tiny slide in there. I know this isn't really part of the lesson, but I'm throwing it in at the end because I just did it, right? So... yeah, that's not so bad, right? So again, notice instantly you can convert that little arpeggio lick into something a little bit more expansive if you want, and impress your mom and your grandma next time they come over for Christmas dinner. So let's get into the next section here where we're going to talk about the scale and knowing where the scale positions are, because I do this little... Where does that come from? How do I know where the scales are? Let's do it right now. All right, let's get into the scale stuff. Essentially, after I do this sequence here, right? Essentially, these 3 notes here, where do they come from? And that right there, I've talked about it in the other lesson where I'm like, you got to be able to know where you are. And you're like, okay, that's definitely Dorian right there. Then you're like, oh, look, I can now jump into, yes, Phrygian. Then, of course, Lydian. Then, of course, Mixolydian. Don't forget that's the minor pentatonic there, right? Next is going to be, of course, Aeolian. And last but not least, Locrian. Before you get, of course, to the start, Ionian there, right? So listen, I'm not going to beat this to death, because what I just did there is what you should be doing. Essentially, you're like, okay, where do those notes come from? You did it on one string. Maybe you just figured it out. Maybe it was intuitive. the next step has to be, what did I just do there? And where is that? And then you're like, okay, I'm at Dorian, and then so on and so forth. That right there, reinforcing it, calling out the scale shapes, playing through them and stuff like that, getting comfortable so that you know each position and where to move to next. You're like, moving up, Phrygian, obviously. That's going to be Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, of course, Locrian, and into the Ionian position. Right there, that is a huge sort of advantage with respect to playing, because it just lets you sort of take off the pressure. And of course, you might sort of change your idea. You're like, I'm going to go. Right, so now all of a sudden you have a whole new idea, because you're combining, instead of a diatonic sequence of arpeggios, maybe arpeggios and scales together, right? Where you're like, and so on and so forth, right? And you can just keep doing that ad nauseum. Notice how one thing builds on another, builds on another, builds on another, and all of a sudden you can now mix and match this stuff as necessary. And you can take one idea and recycle it again and again and again, and keep getting new variations and new sort of like practice ideas to keep your forward momentum up and going. There it is. Now let's look at this last section here, where I do a major 7 arpeggio into the major 9 again, and then I do this cool sort of like, you know, the classic that I've done a million times, descending arpeggio in small chunks, which I call a compound arpeggio. Let's do it. All right, after I do the second sequence, so I'm starting here, of course. I'm in this position here. Again, I'm going to borrow from G major. So I'm going to play the third inversion, major 7. Okay, which again, I'm using G major 7, but now in the major, the third inversion, I should say. And that comes from essentially the Locrian position, right? I'm seeing this as Locrian. And so I could have played a whole bunch there. I could have done D major as a triad. Could have done D major 7. We could have done this minor 7 variant again, even though we just did it, so it didn't make sense to do that. We have dominant 7 from Locrian. We have minor 7 flat 5. We have diminished. So you have a ton of choices in there. In this case, it just made sense to keep it with the G major 7, right? And of course, that's going to allow me to then jump up here back to the Mixolydian position, if you will, and just fill in the entirety of this major 9. And from here, now I already know that I'm going to essentially play the Phrygian position. Okay, so that's the first little chunk. That comes from, in my mind, when I did this arpeggio here. That is also overlapped over top of this major triad. Right, so you can see I'm ending in A major here. And you're like, oh, that's the 5 of D. So I'm playing a big A major chord, basically as an arpeggio. Where do those notes come from? Right, that's going to be from the Aeolian position there, right? And notice that is a minor arpeggio. Now, if you sort of look at this, you see me going A major here. So I'm not playing A Mixolydian. This gets to the other lesson. Now I'm substituting in the A major instead of A Mixolydian, right? And it just works really nicely. And of course, when you use the triad and you start expanding out, all I'm really doing is going, I'm doing this, and then I'm going, then 3 arpeggios there, and then I fill in the blanks, if you will. These 3 notes. Notice this. Yeah, I know. And again, if you're really looking to break that down, think of this as the Ionian position. Which puts me in Dorian here, of course, Phrygian, so on and so forth. And again, you can sort of see when I was doing this original one, I was just basically playing the minor 7 variant like this, which happens, of course, in the Phrygian position and therefore also the first inversion major. If I could actually play it, right? So that right there is basically the superimposition principle being used in spades, right? So again, that's going to be 9, 10, 12, then 9 again. That's going to be 10, 9, basically your D triad here, right? That you would normally get in the open position. I'm doing it right there. 7, 6 on the G string, right? Then I'm coming down this minor triad. Oh, that's F sharp minor. Then this puts me at these 3 notes from the 3 notes per string system for Ionian. Jumping down one more time so I get to the 3rd of the A major triad. Right? And there it is. It's just me connecting these simple arpeggios together using the 3 notes per string system. Slowly. Jump into the major 7. Right, so the options are endless type situation. But again, you start to see me mix and match. I'm no longer just playing things relative to D major diatonically. Now I'm like, okay, well, the 5th degree, that can either be Mixolydian or Ionian. And in this case, I dumbed it down to the simple triad rather than the dominant 7. But of course I could have played the dominant 7 there, right? If you're like, okay, this is 3rd degree. Oh, there it is right there, right? So you're like, so, I mean, again, you get to the speed of mind thing where it's just, you just get comfortable sort of moving between them because you can see it as multiple different things. Is it Mixolydian or is it major? Is it Dorian or is it Aeolian? Once you start thinking like that, you will quickly rise to the ranks of musician rather than just being a guitar player, right? So to sum up here, first off is the diatonic arpeggio sequence. Now, whether you borrow a chord or not is up to you. Use your ears to be your guide kind of situation, but just getting comfortable with the idea of being like, okay, 4, 3, 2, 2nd degree, right? 1st degree. That's a flat 7 technically. Right, then into 6. So, how you do that, how you understand it, your choice. And then, of course, you can either do 5 strings or 6 strings or 3 strings or whatever it is you want to do. You can start adding in little extra dipsy doodles here, sliding up and down or whatever you want to do. We kind of covered it. Next is knowing where you are in terms of the scale degrees. If you're like, well, that's Dorian. So knowing where you are. Now listen, it goes as deep as being essentially, if you only have 3 notes to go off of, you're going to be required to do that. Now, obviously, if you got like a sequence of 3 like that, you have a lot of choices, right? You have this Phrygian, or you have Lydian, or you have Locrian. So it's up to you to be like, okay, I can intuitively hear what the next note is in the sequence based off this initial first 3 notes, and sometimes it's just 1 note. So I know that's a bit of a daunting task, and I was like, it can't be done. But trust me, it can be done, and it's something you have to practice a lot. And last but not least, of course, is starting to understand that you can use superimposition to spice up the playing, right? If 1, 4, and 5 are all major chords, at any point in time, I can substitute in major or major 7. I could have done major 7 raised 11 for the 4th degree. I could have done dominant 7 for the 5th degree. There's a whole bunch of choices there, but essentially the first thing has to be like, okay, in this case, I don't want to play A as the dominant 7. I want to play A now as the major triad, which is what you get me doing here. Now, I could have done this basic one, but using this minor makes it sound a little bit more musical. If you just do all triads that are major, sounds pretty cool, but can get very samey sounding. But substituting in a tiny variation that happens very quickly in a sequence of notes can be the difference between a really killer solo and something that just sounds pretty good. So I hope that this lesson helped, even though I kind of hacked through it a little bit. Just, it's not my day today, boys. You know how it is. I wish you all the best in your practice sessions. Head down. Just keep working on it. But remember, all the weight is on your shoulders. I just sat here this morning and came up with this exercise in 10 minutes because I was like, what are we going to do today? And there it is. That could have been a lesson. It could have been a practice exercise when I'm doing my own jams. And that is exactly what you should be doing when you're jamming. Do not do the, oh, look, we'll just go through the Friday night routine. Instead, be like, I want to do a diatonic arpeggio of you know, whatever, these ones, or mixing and matching, go between dominant 7 and minor 7 flat 5, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. And then sort of set these parameters and then just get the nose to the grindstone. The more you do that, I guarantee you the faster and the more likely you'll be successful at music in general, because it always keeps these practice sessions fresh and new, and you don't get bored, and it's a lot more interesting and a lot more fun to play. You guys are amazing. Have a killer Sunday. We'll see you in the next one.